Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Holman, for the week of February 25th. I've got my co-host slash producer slash marketing guru, Rob Lawlisher with Road 55 Marketing, joining us again today. Going to feed us some great headlines this morning. Rob, looking forward to getting started.
Don't forget, Dan, I'm the guy who washes your car on Tuesdays, too. Whatever needs doing. I'm excited about the week, mostly because in one of the stories it talks about pizza and wine, and I tell you, I didn't get the game weight by saying no to those two things. So, a lot of good stories that we're going to be touching on, including we've got a story about retail real estate, and it kind of zeroes in on about the endangered humdrum retail real estate out there. So, looking forward to your thoughts. Really interesting to see lots of Canadians are starting new businesses, and that retail was really leading the way in a number of the provinces in the country. So that was awesome. And we've got another story, that this topic is not going away, just about e-commerce growth, but really zeroing in on what 2021 looks like. And as always, welcome your views there, Dan. And as I mentioned, pizza and wine. A bit of a love story, maybe we call it. No. This is
it is a love story. It was a Valentine's Day promo.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. I was just between lovers of pizza and wine, but it just talks about the million hidden lessons for small businesses in partnership marketing, and I thought that was super cool. So looking forward to talking about that. And of course, as always, we got a great retailer question, and keep those coming in, folks, because really having fun engaging on that front. Okay, sir. So the first story comes to us from greenentrepreneur.com, and a headline of now the retailers are holding the high cards. Dan, what jumps to your mind when you read this story?
Well, the focus on the article might have been highly, I use that as maybe a bit of a pun. Yep. This is really from the Cannabis World, directed on vacant retail space or vacant real estate that was caused by the pandemic, and the need for landlords and developers to pivot in how they're offering. And I've got to say, that's a whole lot easier said than done. Yeah. Asking a developer midstream to realign, reshift, not so easy. But I do recognize that there are, strategies and opportunities that developers and landlords, can take to create mixed use residential, mixed use office space that include needed retail. If you're in a tower, look in St. Albert here, one of our better developments that's mixed use is Shops at Boudreau. Another one is the, Grandin Towers. And they're creating this mixed residential, mixed office, and mixed retail.
Right.
Partnered with food and beverage. So it can be done. And so, there are strategies to create that opportunity. But the real focus here should be focused on, or the real focus here should be, steadily focused on the pending flare-up that we're going to see in retail in the next 6 to 18 months. And a little later on in the podcast, we're going to talk about, why retail is so powerful in Canada and the fact that it led new business startups in 2020.
Yep.
But so for this article, yes, we're talking about the landlords maybe needing to be a little bit more creative or looking for ways to allow a non-conventional demising of their space to fit the potentially smaller retailer that is looking for that next opportunity. We've talked on previous podcasts, perhaps more than we probably should have, but we've talked on these previous podcasts about the shift that will happen in retail, or shift to retail, that's going to happen with the segment of the, use my air quotes, I lost my job business population. They're going to make the decision to do it themselves rather than return to that previous corporate life that they lived. And these now budding entrepreneurs will be looking for smaller spaces to start their journey. And landlords, Rob, have to be ready to adjust and adapt to what that retailer needs. And that means that they're going to have to look at big footprint retail and ask themselves, can I, will I adjust this space to accommodate more than one retailer? Can I put up a demising wall? Can I eliminate utilities and load it all up into rental costs instead of having to remeter spaces. One of the biggest pushbacks we hear from landlords, and when it comes to demising a space, is the cost of not the demising wall, but of remetering services to that space, rather than just saying, hey, look, I got your utilities. I'm going to give you this space. It's scalable, 800 to 1,800 square feet. Let's go forward here. And that's where the opportunity is going to be. And guess what? Cannabis retail is probably the fastest growing retail sector in Canada. It's still on, I think, the left side of that bell curve. And we're going to see more and more of those very small boutique stores open. The Auroras of the world are going to die on the vine with their, several thousand square foot displays. It's going to be the guys like Rocky Mountain Roots and, some of the other bigger players or smaller players that continue to open small footprint stores in spaces that are not maybe traditionally small footprint.
In terms of timelines, Dan, it's not uncommon. The developers typically have a long lens, right? They're many years out.
Right.
Is this, how long do they hold their breath? Do you think that they're still trying to weather the storm, or they're actively, okay, we have to engage in this now because this is definitely going to affect us the next 2 to 3 years?
Has holding your breath ever been a good strategy, Rob?
When I'm underwater for a little bit, but it doesn't last long.
For that 40 seconds, you and I can hold our breath. I read something the other day about Kate Winslet set this record at 5 minutes and 41 seconds underwater. I think they thought she was dead. But
she could hold it longer than Leo DiCaprio can.
She obviously better than Leo.
Of course, she let him sink to the bottom, but we won't get into that.
Rob, I think, when we talk about the landlords and them holding their breath or waiting on that long-term lease, it's an exercise, that has nothing but pending death for everyone connected to it. We've got to become a bit more flexible. And it's different for a guy like me that goes out and looks for a long-term space than it is a retailer, especially a startup that might want 800 feet today and be that way for the next 18 to 24 months and then need to expand. So that also speaks to picking the right landlord. Joining a family that's going to allow you to grow inside their portfolio of opportunity and space.
I'm going to share my little nugget. It worked for us here. We have a small studio space, but we said, well, instead of getting into the talking to them in per square foot, we just went into it with, we'll give you $125,000.
Yeah.
Now that will be spread over that, but it changed the whole conversation.
For sure it does.
It was super interesting how that happened.
Yeah. And we lean hard on these landlords to do build outs and invest money in space, and they don't want to invest their dollars in short-term opportunity. And so that means that the retailer also has to be adaptable in the space that they're getting. A guy like me goes in and needs a $200,000 tenant improvement allowance to build out a space the way I want it or to believe I need it. But a retailer has to be much more flexible than that and be, good with the color of the walls and bring fixtures in to tell a story, and maybe not so concerned with, that great engineered hardwood floor or reclaimed barnboard wall or the things that really do cost money for that landlord that the retailer doesn't have today. And again, this is about us really coming together and compromising in size, scale, space, investment, and term. The biggest thing is term. These landlords got to get off their held breath and accept a 24-month lease from someone.
Interesting. Right on. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Speaking of a lot of data in this next story coming off of Business Wire, talks about Owner, OWNR.
Yeah.
And this is an offshoot of RBC, just putting that out there for everyone. It talks about the new data that reveals how COVID-19 has impacted the creation of new businesses. The data, obviously shows how they're pivoting to these new business offerings. And as I said earlier, talked about how retail was leading the way in a few provinces. I think it was BC, Alberta, Ontario.
Yep.
And that, so what stood out to you in this story here, Dan?
Well, Owner, certainly, as you highlighted, part of a part of an RBC arm. They are the self-proclaimed leading business and legal management platform in Canada. It sounds like maybe I'm saying that with a bit of sarcasm, self-proclaimed, but they have a different perspective. And Owner really does do a good job in gathering these studies. And they announced the release of this data that revealed how COVID-19 has impacted the creation of new businesses. And the data shows that entrepreneurs greatly impacted, their ability to survive the pandemic by pivoting. And we've used that word so much, Rob, by pivoting, by adapting, by that forced evolution. Pivoting their business offering allowed them to perhaps survive, and more importantly, recognize gaps that were in their industry. Right. How many times have we talked about the importance of gap analysis, looking at your market segment, looking at your marketplace and saying, hey, this isn't here. I could do this in my store. Let's go forward. And that's how a lot of retailers are surviving. It is by the expansion in some cases of what they're offering, or better, perhaps the narrowing of some of their offerings that fill a gap and allow them to find some success. So I did pull some interesting facts out of this article. It really is a good read. We'll make sure there's a link to it in the newsletter and the copy in the podcast so that you can go and read this, because there are some pretty good stats. And the data is demonstrating that small business is going to continue to be the backbone of our economy. Maybe let's let all of our political friends know that small business is the backbone of our economy.
Yep.
Yeah. 26% of entrepreneurs in 2020 reported that the pandemic created a gap that in their market new business addressed. So they created a business that identified gap. 26% of all new entrepreneurs. 20% of new entrepreneurs saw their job at risk as a result of COVID and started their own business in order to be proactive. 14% of new entrepreneurs in 2020 launched their business as a result of being laid off. And despite being disproportionately impacted by lockdowns and stay-at-home orders and all the other, bullshit that comes from this crazy pandemic, retail remained the top growing industry for new business owners in Canada. Retail ranked as the number one industry that saw new business launched in, as we said before, Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta. But there's a but here. Yep. There are still challenges for the nearly 46% of aspiring entrepreneurs. The biggest barrier for them launching their business is not knowing how to start, and pointing to a need for greater resources and education for small business owners. And I would add, Rob, that there needs to be a shift in the way that business incubation is offered and delivered throughout Canada. And as we sort of talked about in the last story, there's maybe even an opportunity for landlords to be more attractive to that prospective tenant, that prospect, by being more incubation driven instead of bottom line driven. Like, let's be incubation driven. And we talk about these new businesses, Rob, and this is in 2020, coming off of this crazy pandemic, that these three provinces saw more retail open than any other business. What's that going to tell you about the rest of 21 and 2022? Retail will take a strong hold of our economic position. The indie retailer will take a very strong hold in our communities of that business economy.
Right on. Well, I'm excited for I know all of this comes out of, crap, and everyone's making their way through it. But you know what? When you see that stat, was it 46% or just, struggling with that? What do you do next?
Right.
Canadian Retail Solutions is the sponsor here, Dan. And let's talk about that, because I know you and I were chatting yesterday. Your whole process, your team starts with a discovery call and that investment of, don't sit in the dark in your own corner wondering, what do I do next? Like, get on the horn with Dan. Dan, how can they reach you? throw
Well,
an email
on
your way?
the Canadian retail solution side, the best thing to do is just send an email to dan@retailbycrs.com, and I'll make sure that you get connected with the right person for you. But before that ever happens, you're going to spend the appropriate amount of time with me. That might be 30 or 60 minutes. You'll spend that time with me going through that bit of discovery. Discovery is really the uncovering of facts and figures. It's uncovering parts of the story that aren't being properly told so that we can better align the needed action step, Rob.
Yeah.
Whether it's about point of sale or inventory plan, it doesn't matter. If you're in retail and you don't know where to turn next, I'm standing here with my hand up, not out.
Yeah.
Right? Come and talk to us. We'll make sure that you're speaking to the right person. And yes, we are always going to be biased to our partners, but we're more biased to independent retail than we are to the products or services we provide them. Yeah. I'm more interested in you being successful than I am in me getting a POS sale or a planning thing or whatever it is, and a consulting engagement. I want to make sure you're in the right place that's right for you right now. And that just takes a phone call. So yes, hit us up at retailbycrs.com.
Well, and as you said, partners, like it's plural, you have options and so much. And I love, you said this a while back, and it really stuck with me that, retailers, they're the artists, and you want to let them be the artists. And This is where your team, the math nerds, the mad scientists come in with the, we'll figure out the best system to really help you thrive in your art. And I just love looking at it that way and know that's such a big part of the value proposition of what your team brings to the table. So folks, head to retailbycrs.com. Like I said, the latest point of sale software, merchandise intelligence, and more. Dan and his team will be there to help you. Okay, sir. Next story comes from emarketer.com, talking about e-commerce, a bit what was and what they feel is going to be, that it will continue to be boosted still for a set period of time by necessity, but then getting into, what are the opportunities that lie there? What are your thoughts here, Dan?
Well, retail e-commerce was thrust forward in 2020 due to that, periodic stay-at-home measures and so on enacted across the country. I mean, it was thrust forward, charged forward, and retailers that didn't get on board, suffered. But during mandated quarantines in the first wave and the second wave that sort of coincided with holiday, with that holiday season, consumers shopped online to a degree they had never done before. And that doesn't mean that they're going to abandon that when we go back to some level of normalcy and open in our brick and mortars. It really just is a tribute to the retailer that did adapt. And I want to share some good numbers or statistics that come from this, because there are still going to be a portion of the audience, Rob, that is scared to death that they don't know e-com well enough to survive. Totally. And e-com in 2020 made up 10% of the total retail dollar generated through e-commerce. 2021 is going to see that number in Canada grow to somewhere between 11 and 14 cents. But what's most important to recognize, the move from 8% to 10% of total retail dollars, 2021, Rob, is forecast at 640 billion.
With a B.
Yeah, with a B, retail dollars. And somewhere between 11 and 14% of that, 65 to 70 billion will be done on e-com channel. And the largest e-com growth sector in 2020 in retail came on the back of the indie retailer that pivoted and adapted and shifted their business focus. And they are the ones that made up that 10%. That 2% difference between 19 and 20, and that's all it was. In 2019, it was a little over 8%. It might have been 8.6 or 8.7% to what 2020 was at 10%. That growth didn't come on the backs of the, Sam Waltons of the world or the Bezos programs of the world. It came off the backs of indie retailers that said, okay, you got me backed into a corner here. There's nothing more I can do. She needs me. I'm going to have to shift to an online strategy for a period of time that satisfies that demand that exists today. And certainly that's where we land right now. We're in this comfortable or uncomfortable mix of where e-com's going to let go a little bit of the rein, and brick and mortar is going to regain some of those reins. And we're going to see, that cart shrink on the e-com side a little bit, and the brick and mortar cart is going to expand in 2021. That in no way, shape, or form is me advocating for you to steer away from e-com. I've said this. I've made my bed, and I'm going to lie in it. I was wrong. I made peace with it. You got to have an e-com strategy. You've got to come up with an omnichannel presentation. And, as Rob talked about a few minutes ago, if you're not sure how to do that, just pick up the phone and call us. We have ability to get you connected to e-com. We've got partners that are doing it at very affordable rates. There are lots of people in this retail service sector that can help you transition, the needed transition. It's not just it's the needed transition to offer this omni-channel opportunity for your client.
I get so excited for independent retailers where, the damage came to them in a business model that I'll boldly say was geographically based on, we're focused on females age 40 to 60 in our community. And you look at the data and it's like, okay, there's 5,000 people that's my audience. And that's what I built my business on. This necessity has pushed them into all of a sudden that demographic, but now it's across Canada or the United States, whatever that is, building opportunity that when we kind of get back to be it the norm of brick and retail, you've added significant opportunity to the growth, like well beyond your physical geographic borders.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to highlight, there's probably a story that we'll talk about in the coming weeks. This morning, Retail Insider released a news article about one of our clients, Elle's Closet Boutique, and the explosive growth that she's recognized through this pandemic. And really that came from her expanding outside of her 8 walls. She was 2 stores when the pandemic hit. So it was really about, how do I get outside those 8 walls that now I can't open my front door to? And that commitment to make that change has allowed her to literally introduce herself to millions of people across the country instead of was it 1.6 million in the Edmonton area? Right. And that's what we need to do. We need to continue expanding our 4 walls to reach more people, and you have to do it on a personal level. Independent retailers, if you're listening, stop using people in your ads that aren't you, that don't tell your story. Too many retailers make this mistake of putting someone in front of their audience. They are influencers. And I'm going to say this several times. You got to own your power as an influencer. Your vision, your creation, your launch, your store is an extension of who you are. And people connect with who you are, not who the 16-year-old girl that works with you is. Does that make sense, Rob?
Yeah.
You gotta make a personal connection.
Right. Dan, I'm smelling a business opportunity, a retail Toastmasters type club, building that confidence. And without a doubt, that's, I think, the biggest barrier that I don't want to be,
for sure,
be out there and that fear of it. But 100% totally agree with that. And I learned a new nugget today I'm taking away. I've never heard 2 stores referred to as 8 walls before. And I love that. Beyond your 8 walls. I was doing the math.
Does it look like a stop sign or
say octagon or
hey, it is like ultimate fighting. Being in retail is an ultimate fight. All right, we are the McGregors of the world.
Now refer to your second location as the octagon. Okay, I said earlier I was looking forward to this because we're talking about pizza and wine. This next story comes from morningbrew.com and highlights this. Offers about 1 million hidden lessons for small businesses in partnership marketing. And Dan, we've talked lots about collaborations.
Yeah.
This is another version of that. What grabbed you in this story?
Well, certainly you're right, Rob. We do talk about collaborations a lot, probably almost on every podcast, and this week is no different. This story, this really good story, is about how a small pizza joint. I don't mean to be insulting when I say small pizza joint. I'm making a point here. Yep. The small pizza joint partnered with a large-scale beverage group to create this fun collaboration. The major wine vendor, I say major wine vendor, if you haven't heard of Yes Way Rosé, you're not a fan of rosés. Let me just say that. So Yes Way Rosé and this Brooklyn-based pizza joint, Williamsburg Pizza, I shouldn't call them a joint, it's Williamsburg Pizza Shop, really teamed up to bring New Yorkers a Valentine's Day from home kit. And it was a true collaboration. We're talking about you ever been to a pizza place in New York City? Right? You don't find a smaller retail presentation.
They don't waste any space.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And this kit that they partnered together to create included, of course, just like our friends at Boston Pizza, the Olivieris, they're doing their heart-shaped pizza. So they did the heart-shaped pizza and a bottle of Yes Way Rosé bubbles and a limited edition wine tote in their, Yes Rosé's Pignets. Yes. I can't get it out of my mouth.
Say that 3 times in a row. Yeah.
Yes Way Rosé's signature pink tote bag, wine tote bag. Cool. And it was available on February 14th. And it really launched with great success. And this is why this article that you've got to read goes on to have a Q&A session with the founders of Yes Way Rosé. And they share these 3 great lessons. So a lesson for the indie retailer: creating genuine relationships with bigger brands can't hurt you. And it will should lead to future opportunities down the road. Don't shy away from standing in front of a big brand. Own your superpower as an influencer. I said this about the last article. We are influencers, and you've got to own that superpower. You have the ability to influence decision, and you've got to own that. Yeah. For the big brand, partnering with a smaller brand provides them this CSR, corporate social responsibility angle that allows companies to gain wider reach, especially if brands have a lot in common. So this corporate social responsibility that we talk about shows that they're stepping down, if you will, and helping this local Williamsburg pizza shop reach a much bigger audience. And they believe in the power of that indie business that's out there that is the backbone of economy. And then the last lesson learned was really on strategy. Big brands often provide seeding with either celeb audiences or access to their influencers. And a national network are just a few perks of partnering with a great big collab brand for a small business.
Yeah,
this is a great example of that.
Well, here we are in a northern city in Canada talking about Williamsburg Pizza in Brooklyn there. So I love it. On that relationship side. And you made a great point about the independent retailer being an influencer in that they own these just intimate relationships with just a real concentrated audience. And I think it was last week, Dan, we talked about how Big Box is trying to rip lessons out of the
indie retailer's playbook,
retailer playbook, and I think this is something too that you probably think this is out of reach. You've probably unsold it to yourself before you've ever even made that attempt to reach out, and know that they're looking for these opportunities too, and sometimes you put that opportunity in front of them, make them look like, figure out their hero points, and you're on your way to a successful collaboration partnership.
Right. And every independent retailer right now should be thinking about who's the biggest non-competitive brand in my marketplace today. Who is that? And how do I go and introduce myself to them? Let's remember, they are the same as we are. They started in with an entrepreneurial spirit. They've grown, they've evolved, they've trained and learned, and they're just like we are.
Yeah.
Right? It's not difficult to go and introduce yourself to someone. And you would be surprised at how many of those bigger brands recognize us as smaller brands because of the work that we do at Ground Zero.
Cool. And sidebar, they'll usually come with a sample pack and they'll leave it with you. So here's a box of wine. Let's have a conversation now.
Yeah, I want to partner with Endeavor Brewing because I wouldn't mind a case of beer from them.
Okay, we're putting that out into the universe here.
Throw it out there. I did one better. That's where we're moving into, right beside him.
Okay, so we're putting that out there now.
Coincidence? I don't know.
You got a new shop that. I don't have great advice every day, but I've said it a couple times. I'll say it again. You just make sure that there's a beer line running over the roof and into your shop there. Nothing cooler than having your own keg tap mounted to the wall. Okay, Dan, we're really building up steam here with our retailer questions and, more importantly, the answers. They're rolling in. We got another one this week. Tell us a bit about this week's retailer question.
Well, this came from Alan in Pickering. I said to you earlier, I think I even know Alan from my days in furniture in Pickering. But his email address didn't come that way. So the email said to me, "Hi, Mr. Holman." Mr. Holman. I did remind him very quickly that Mr. Holman is my father.
There we go.
Not me. You can just call me Dan or Dummy, or I answer to just about anything, Rob. So anyways, Alan said, "Mr. Holman, on your podcast on February 5th, you talked about key themes for this year. Do you have a copy of those themes that you could send me, as well as any other shared content you think is important for a furniture retailer?" And so, we did maybe breeze through the themes from our partners at Management One a few weeks ago. So we're going to reshare that article from their president, Mike Alec.
Okay.
In this article, Mike outlines their 5 key themes for retail this year, or for retailers this year. And so 2021, their emphasis, these 5 themes, the emphasis on assortment planning and the fact that there's no going backwards, marketing, messaging and branding, the need to split your year into 2 halves, and then the 5th thing was building adaptability into your business. So for our partners at Management One, we're sharing this article again this week in the blog. Mike's done a fabulous job of putting this very concise theme together. And this is really how Management One is going to move through 2021 in the delivery of their education, which is probably a pretty good segue, Rob, to Alan's second part of his question.
Yep.
He asked about sharing other content that's important to, in his case, furniture retail, but really it's about sharing information that's important to retailers. And you and I have spoken several times about relevance. And this is a great opportunity to remind everyone about the importance of leaning on and into relevant news and educational content for your retail business. There is far too much doom and gloom in our media today. And Management One is just an example of someone you should be listening to. I do.
Yep.
They're connected to the largest, I believe, the largest indie retail audience on the planet. And they share content, strategies, and ideologies that help push business forward, your retail business forward.
So that's, obviously retail driven, Dan, and like even Alan talked about, he wanted furniture retail info. What other information should retailers be looking for, in your opinion?
Well, Rob, my favorite way to consume new information, healthy information, is through newsletters, blog posts, and obviously podcasts.
Yeah, here we are.
Now, every retailer should have their favorites. We've already talked about Management One, and everybody should be signed up to that newsletter. You should also think about the specific areas, the silos in your business, in where you are looking for inspiration or guidance.
Yep.
My go-to, I lean hard on Retail Insider. They've got great general retail news that is relevant to me. May not be relevant always to that indie clothing retailer, but that doesn't mean that they're not sharing great information that's relevant to you.
Right.
I also believe retailers should have a marketing source, a newsletter, a podcast that is focused on retail marketing. Crystal Media does a great job. Morning Brew, we read a lot of Morning Brew stuff, and it really comes from a marketing angle, and it's a good spot. They're good sources. I'm obviously, one of my favorite newsletters, Rob, is the Road 55. Your 5x5 Wednesday newsletter, concise, informative, humorous sometimes, and it allows me to make a connection. And every bit of information that we consume, we have to take it in and say, okay, how does this apply to me? Does this apply to me? Right. If it does, then how? And is there a way for me to make this my own?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to make it your own.
And just on that, and you're kind of going down that path where breaking out of what I'll say is like just direct in your industry, because I'm just such a fan of I tell so many non-retailer businesses to listen to your podcast that's retail driven, because so many of the lessons really any entrepreneur can pull out and make it their own, just as you said.
Our whole thing about the podcast and creating this podcast, or I shouldn't say creating and adapting the podcast the way we did sort of post the first lockdown, was to pull news articles with a shift that we could apply even one little tidbit to a retailer's business that could help them. And that was the purpose. And there are lots of platforms out there, Rob, that's their focus. I mean, our POS platforms are always sharing really good content. Yep. And so important to sign up to their newsletters. And I think today, even if you don't use these podcast platforms, Shopify does a pretty good job of sharing relevant information. VendHQ.com, great job in sharing information. And of course, our partners at Retail Pro are going to bring to you retail information that fits that mid-market. And that's got relevant stuff for you. And sometimes that relevance is definitely driven by the inspiration it can provide. Rob, those three POS platforms are my go-to for POS-driven news that talks about the way a retailer is adapting technology, point-of-sale technology, or ERP, or CRM product within the point-of-sale system. And it does share great information. Shopify's still doing a pretty good job of sharing decent information that doesn't have a sales hook to it. Right? That is just give without the intention of getting. Again, important note here, Rob, is to think about your business, the specific areas of your business. Stay out of mainstream media. Go find that specific, smaller, news-driven, story-driven, open-to-share-driven website, podcast, whatever kind of sources are you're looking for. The way you consume, I listen more than I read. I'm a terrible reader. I get caught up in thought, and then I'm off on my own tangent when I'm supposed to be reading something. And so probably much like the way I talk.
Squirrel.
Right? But so I listen to things more frequently than I read them. So podcasts are definitely one of my sort of favorite ways to share relevant information or consume, relevant information. We as entrepreneurs, as business people, as retailers need to learn and grow every single day. And the more time we spend inside our own little bubble will never get us the growth that we aspire to. And before I forget, I should have said who my favorite or what my favorite weekly newsletter was. It really does come from retailbycrs.com. The newsletter that we curate every single week or that we produce every week is a curated collection of what we believe are the last 7 to 10 days headlines with a spin. We promise to share headlines with a spin that makes it important to the indie retailer. We're going to pull out or extract tips and tricks and strategies and wins from all of these stories that make it more relevant to you. And if you're not signed up for our weekly newsletter, this is the time. I would encourage you, just sign up for it. Go to retailbycrs.com, hit that newsletter. There's a listing of all of the archived newsletters, every link we've ever shared, copies of the podcast. There's tons of information that's there and available for you for free. And nothing's free. For an investment in your time, there is good content there. So last plug, get over to retailbycrs.com and register for that newsletter. If you want to get a question answered, send me an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com, and I promise a speedy personal response. No topic is off limits. Just send your question to dan@thewealthyretailer.com, and we'll answer it, much like we've done in the last, 3 or 4 weeks we've been pulling questions.
Right on. And just I think I want to explain a little bit on the time, like respecting people's time, that we're trying to make it as concise as we can for them, and giving folks that understanding that, the process starts with about, I'm going to say it's anywhere from 400 to 500 headlines and stories that we're combing through to turn into 20 or so. And then you're, diving down another layer, 4 or 5 stories that okay, so it started up there and ended up down here,
right? Really
based on what you feel, the independent retailer. This is what we need to talk about this week. This is going to bring you the most value, and
right. And it is about us looking at those stories and saying, more importantly, today I have the belief that we want to peel away all the bad shit, and so we're looking at those stories that maybe don't speak so well or highlight so well good stories in retail, and we're looking for that. And so we've done our job 3 weeks in a row here, Rob. We've pulled a very personal story out about a store that's had some success in something they've done, and I need to get some pizza now.
Okay, I'll wrap it up here quick. As Dan said, in the weekly newsletter, head to retailbycrs.com to sign up if you haven't, and share it with someone that you think might benefit from getting it each week. We'll have these stories that we talked about today. In addition, we've got a few more links about stories, one about retail barter pay, for retailers looking to find new ways to do business and improving their cash flow. That was an interesting one. I like this, a story that reminded us that sometimes, folks, you just got to take a pause and celebrate our wins. And I really like that quote in that story. Huge marketplace seller aggregators. It talks about, the effects, positive good on Amazon and retail. You might want to check out that story. And you talk about interesting, intimate stories. Here's this couple who started as this, online boutique and grew into this retail tech powerhouse. What an interesting story that was. So lots of great stuff this week, Dan. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Looking forward to continuing next week.
All right. And if you haven't, folks, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Find us on whichever platform you're on. Leave a review. You can make fun of me, but more importantly, try to make fun of Dan if you're going to do it. But,
that's right.
We welcome your feedback, and hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.